Welcome back to Trust Yourself, episode 4. This episode is going to be about my journey starting off in the creator economy. If you missed the last episode, we ended it talking about how I returned from Europe after backpacking and starting to write newsletters online and finding a podcast on the internet with about 1,000 views from a guy named Dakota Robertson and another guy named Dan Koe. So that's where we're going to jump in here. So don't remember exactly how I came across this podcast, but as I mentioned in the last episode, for whatever reason, I was following Dakota Robertson on Instagram at the time. And I just liked what he was putting out. And because I was getting more and more into writing and I had so much space as an RA before school started, kind of just like sitting with myself, being bored, not knowing what to do, my curiosity led me to look up Dakota Robertson on YouTube. And the first thing I found that caught my attention was a podcast between him and this dude named Dan Koe. And instantly I just loved it. I loved what these guys were talking about. I saw myself in them so much. They were other like 20-something-year-old guys. I think at the time, Dakota was probably like 25. Dan was maybe 25. So around my age now, a few years older. But I found this podcast and the stuff they were talking about amazed me because on one hand, they were talking about the same things I was interested in, like waking up early, getting sunlight in your eyes, running, lifting, eating clean, reading, writing, right? These same type of self-improvement habits that I was getting into at the time. But they were taking it a step further, talking about making money online by writing about your interests. And at the time, that kind of blew my mind because I was already writing, but I didn't ever equate it to making money. And this is why I think I've been able to stay so consistent for 3 years now, 2-3 years now, writing almost every single day. Like whether it's just a tweet or whether it's a longer newsletter, or I probably put out 150 to 200 newsletters in the past few years. And the reason why I think I've stayed consistent is because it was never for money in the first place. It was for creative expression. It was for the love of sharing myself and expressing myself, at first just to myself with journaling and then to the world. And then afterwards, that led me to, I can make money off of this. Eventually, that actually went too far where I lost the creative intrinsic passion for it, but I've refound it again, and now it's this middle way where it's like the creating just happens and the money just happens, like independently, but they're still tied in together. It's a very interesting middle ground I found, which we'll get into that way later. But for now, I was starting to find out about the creator economy, something they were talking about. And I was particularly interested in this dude, Dan Koe. He seemed so fucking cool. He had this long hair. He seemed like a philosopher. He seemed so smart, but also like so slow moving and calculated. And I just loved his vibe. And so around this exact same time that I found these two guys on YouTube on their podcast and started following them and started listening to more and more videos, that same friend from the previous video who I told you always would be very positive and receptive to my newsletters and still is to this day. His name's Justin. He's like big into Roman history and philosophy and stuff. Really fucking great dude. And he said to me one day, he's like, dude, you should write on Twitter. And at this point, I'd been like listening to Dan and Dakota's podcast and like I was already thinking it, like I should probably write on Twitter. Like I think that's the next step, but I was so scared. And once he said it, it kind of was like, okay, yep, I know, you're right, I know. And so that led me to, I believe it might have been September 1st, 2022. I have the screenshot actually, my first ever public tweet on my account. And so this was such a big step for me in terms of getting over the fear of judgment, right? I think a lot of people intrinsically are creative. Everybody's creative to some extent. Like that's what humans are. We are creators naturally as these spiritual beings. But we have this huge block of what are people going to think of me? And I've had that my whole life. At this point, because of so many reps, it's pretty much gone. I can sit here and just chat for a long time. But this first tweet was really scary to send. And so I remember the first tweet. It was like, life is full of slippery slopes. You can run 1 mile and end up running a marathon. Or you can drink one beer and end up an alcoholic or something, like choose your slopes wisely. It's an interesting little tweet. And I had it sitting there on my Twitter account, like ready to post for probably 10 to 15 minutes. I was sitting in my dorm room knowing that it was right to hit post, but fearing everybody who already followed me. And so this was a blessing and a curse. I mean, I guess mostly it was a blessing. It was only a blessing, but I didn't have to start off on Twitter like most creators in the creator economy with 0 followers. I started with like 813 followers. I don't know why that number comes up, but it feels right. And I started with that number because I already had a following from high school because I was already a football player. And in football, you use Twitter for recruiting. So I had like followers from home. I had college football coaches following me from across the country. I had my teammates following me from Northwestern. And I wasn't on a team anymore, but of course they still followed me. And I had my coaches all following me and then friends and family from home. And so me putting out a tweet publicly meant me sharing my ideas with the whole world rather than just now like 30 to 50 people that aren't on my email list. So that was a huge jump. And I remember sitting there with the tweet and just being like, oh, fuck, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. But I did really want to do it. And so I hit post, and I remember I threw my phone across the room, and I just like cringed for like 3 minutes. I was like, that's so fucking embarrassing, but I know I'm supposed to do it. I know it's like I'm going to get over it. But I was so embarrassed. And from there, it became easier and easier and easier. And now it's at the point where like this summer in Thailand, I was literally tweeting from the rave, like on LSD, just like tweeting. That's a whole other story, which we'll get into. But so I post that first tweet, and that starts a slippery slope in and of itself. It's funny, that first tweet was about slippery slopes. And it led me down this wild slippery slope, which ended up with me sitting here right in this moment. So after that moment, I get more and more curious about this creator economy, writing online thing, and I start to watch podcasts, mainly Dan Ko's podcast, the KoCast at the time. He doesn't really do it anymore, but he recorded a bunch of guest episodes in addition to his own. And so he had guys like Dickie Bush. I connected so much with the episode with Dickie Bush. I don't even know if it's public anymore. There's other ones with Dan and Dickie, but this one is from like maybe 4 years ago. And it had like a couple hundred views, maybe 1,000 views. And I connected so much with Dickie because he was a college football player at Princeton, and I almost went and played at Princeton. I've actually messaged him and been like, yo, like we could have been teammates. We would have been overlapping maybe by 1 year, but I ended up, like the coach ended up not talking to me, and then whatever. It's a side tangent, but I resonated with Dickie so much because he was like this guy who went into the finance world and played football at a really high level and was like super disciplined and structured. And at the time, that was my entire personality, was like productivity, monk mode, discipline, self-improvement. So when I saw that episode with Dickie, it gave me so much faith of like, oh my gosh, like I'm so like these guys. Like I am so similar to Dan and Dickie. They're just older than me, but like I could be like them someday. So there's always been this thing in me where I like look up to people, but I realize, oh wait, I could actually be like them. And eventually that all dissolves and you realize there's nobody to look up to. Everybody's even. And the only person to look up to is God or your higher self. But at the time, it was like, I want to be like them. Or before, it was like, I want to be like Julian Edelman. Or before, it was like, I want to be like Kyler Murray or Baker Mayfield, NFL quarterbacks. Or before, it's like, I want to be like the older guys on my football team. Or before, it's I want to be like my dad. So it keeps going back. But it led to this point of wanting to be like Dan Ko and Dickie Bush. And so I ended up finding like Justin Welsh, Tim Denning, some early names. Like if you're in the creator economy, you know these names. And also at the same time, one of my best friends from home, Tyler, he found somebody else in this internet entrepreneurship world, but kind of from another side. I found it from like the writing, creativity, self-expression side. He found it from the business making money side. So he found this game through Alex Hormozy, big time entrepreneur. I'm sure most people listening would know him. So at the same time, I'm like, bro, I'm finding this crazy thing. It's called the creator economy. You can make money writing online. You can just write about your interests online and make a full-time living, and you don't have to work a job. It's insane. And he's like, dude, I found this guy, Alex Hormozy. He's talking about like you can make $10K a month in your 20s and all this stuff. And so we end up sharing with each other. That's always what we've done, me and Tyler. We've shared things from different angles that come together in a really beautiful way. And we were both so in. So I was now finding Alex Hormozy, and he was now finding Dan Coe and this whole side. And we decided to both join Dan Coe's previous community called Modern Mastery, which I don't think is active anymore, but it was like $22 a month, and it was a $5 entry fee for the first month. And looking back now at the level of scarcity I was in at that point, paying $5 for that was like, I don't know if I want to do that. And even paying $22 a month was like, this, I don't know if I could do this month over month. I'm wasting so much money. So, and now it's like I spend hundreds of dollars every month on subscriptions without even thinking about it. So it's funny, that evolution. But we end up joining Modern Mastery together at the same time. And we both end up starting to write on Twitter at the same time. And in Modern Mastery, I mean, it was just like fucking overwhelming. It was this huge Discord with like thousands of people. And I remember like they were talking about write Twitter threads. So I wrote a thread. He was like, how to 10x your productivity, in parentheses, in less than 10 days or something. And Dan was giving feedback in the community at the time for like writing. And he's like, this is really good. He's like, we just got to get eyes on it. So I was like, well, how does that work? How do you get eyes on it? So I ended up finding out later how to get eyes on writing and grow an account. But I didn't know yet. So I was basically just like tweeting, all not really into the void, but like kind of into the void for the first few months. Like, I'm sure people were seeing it from home, like my previous followers. And of course, I lost a ton of those followers, right? They're like, what the fuck is Jack talking about? Like, this dude's weird. But some people would, of course, stick around. But for those first few months, it was just a really big focus on write every day on Twitter, keep writing the newsletter, because that was what got me there, and it felt important. And I felt, okay, long-term, an email list is probably really valuable, even though I didn't still understand what marketing even was. I remember like telling, maybe I told Tyler, I don't know. I remember feeling like in September 2022, once I was getting into this stuff, I was like, I actually don't know what the difference between marketing and sales are. Similar to like, I don't know the difference between consulting and investment banking from the year prior. I was like, I don't know the difference between marketing and sales. But I'm like naturally intuitively good at these things. I just like, I lose interest when it comes back to those labels or those terms, which is, it's interesting for me to know now that whenever my interest shifts to money making, I feel my heart close. Like I literally feel it closing right now as I start to talk about it. So it's really fascinating. But I had no idea about any of this stuff. I was just figuring it out as I went. And so during those early days, during that fall quarter of college, when I was an RA and getting into this stuff, I channeled like an incredible monk mode and an incredible 3-month period of focus and discipline. Again, coming from a lot of like restriction and force. Something's coming to my mind one time, like just like smoking weed. And I think I stayed in bed for like 3 days one time because I pushed myself so hard that inevitably I burnt out. And like that had been a theme of my life for so long, is like push, completely burn out. Push, completely burn out. I know so many people are in that cycle, and I was for so long. And I remember during that time, I was also into a guy named Hamza, self-improvement YouTuber, kind of makes videos like this, or at least used to. And he was talking about self-improvement depression. And I felt like, oh my God, this is so accurate for what I'm experiencing, because like what he talked about was, once you become aware of like all the good habits and self-improvement and like meditating, journaling, eating clean, working out, reading, writing, now you're so conscious and aware that once you don't do them at all, you can't help but know, right? It's like you're not ignorant anymore. Your eyes are awake to the gap between who you are and who you want to be. So I was experiencing that a lot. And so self-improvement for me at this time was like still not coming from a place of self-love. At this point, it's like I don't even participate in self-improvement. I just participate in self-love. I gotta write that one down. Where's my pen? All right, I'll probably tweet that later. But it's true. I don't participate in like force anymore. I participate in flow and surrender and what feels right in the moment. And from that place, it's like all the natural actions flow effortlessly. The video gets made, the writing gets done, the workout gets done, the food is mostly clean. It's not always clean, but it's mostly pretty clean. The reading just happens. The meditating just happens because I want it to happen, because I love sitting with myself. But at the time, go back to college, not now, it was still coming from force. And so for those 3 months, it was like 4:30 a.m., even earlier. I think it was like 4:11 wake-ups every day. And I would go right in the cold shower in the dorm, and like I'd be the first one up every day. There was another dude, Enrique, who would also be up like super early with me, and he was super focused, and we would really bond over that. I remember his girlfriend made a comment that I still remember, and she's like, because I desperately like wanted love at this time, even though I was not opening myself to it. Like I wanted a girlfriend, or like I was like looking for girls or whatever. And all this, like, to be honest, all this stemmed from the desire to like attract a really high value partner. Like the desire to make money, the desire to travel, the desire to go in the creator economy, create a life of freedom. Deep down, it's like the desire to attract a great partner. And I remember she made a comment, because he was telling her I'm like up at 4:30 and I'm tweeting all the time and I'm doing podcasts and I'm like running a half marathon. She's like, I don't even think there's anybody like that can keep up with him, to be honest. And so that was like, wow, like, okay, one, what does that mean? Should I just wait and be patient and find that person? Or like, am I overdoing it? And it's probably a little bit of both. But so I would basically wake up at 4:30, cold shower. I'd run whatever I had to run that day, because I was training for my first half marathon, which was in October. So I would run like anywhere from 2 to 8, 10 miles in the morning, even though it was like snowing. I'd come back, shower, meditate. I'd read for an hour. I'd like set a timer and read a book for an hour. And like the types of books I was reading at the time were like Deep Work by Cal Newport, or like The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. And like these type of productivity, business, mindset type of books, which were great. And I loved them at the time. And so, yeah, that whole period was like, go to school, which I was liking school still at this point, but like it was starting to not become as much of a focus. I remember on the last day possible, like literally the last day I could have done it, September 26th, 2022, the same date as the Vibe Quest Festival event the previous year, I switched my major from economics to psychology, and like I did it without telling anybody, because I didn't want like my parents to be like, why would you do that? Like, are you gonna be able to get a good job? All these things. I was like, my heart is telling me to switch to psychology. So I switched to psychology, and then I was now minoring in entrepreneurship and like business institutions or something like that. So my class schedule was becoming more and more fun. I had this entrepreneurship class where like we got to create an app, and we got to basically pick our teams. And since I was the former athlete, I ended up like working with all the other athletes in the class, which was fun, but like it kind of sucked because I was doing all the work. But I had a lot of fun. There was a few really good friends and people in that group, and that class and that teacher, Neil, and the TA, Kate, they really started to open my eyes to entrepreneurship, and I was like becoming super into it. I was super into the class. I was fucking trying hard. Because I was like, I'm an entrepreneur now. I'm writing on Twitter, which is so funny. Like I had no idea what that meant at the time. Other than that, that quarter was, it was a lot of solitude, but it was also a lot of beautiful connections with new types of people. Like my RA friends became my real great friends. So like Callum, this dude from Hawaii, actually, what's up? Shreya was a dope homie. Shay was an awesome homie. David from Libertyville was awesome. So I started to develop these different types of friends that like they weren't athletes at all. They were not athletes. They were like Northwestern type students. And I loved hanging out with them because I didn't have to be anybody. I was just like a kid with them. It was really fun. And there was also a few other girls in the picture. I won't say their names again, but a few really beautiful connections with friends, with girls, like from girls that I would have never talked to a few years prior, just based on like what they looked like, where they were from, what they were interested in. They were just like so different than anybody I'd ever been around. And my mind was so open and expanded because I had just gone and backpacked Europe. And the mushroom trips opened it as well. But I was so open to just everything. But I was open, but I was also super focused. And like I wouldn't compromise that focus. I had this giant whiteboard in my dorm room, and it had like 25 non-negotiable habits that I was going to do every single day. And like, did I hit them? No, barely ever. But it was like sunlight in eyes in the morning, grounding, only drink water, no processed carbs, no coffee after 12, one tweet, one networking message. I had like studying this course for an hour. I was so fucking focused and disciplined. And I had all these books scattered around my room, which like now I still have here. But people would come in my room and be like, "What the fuck? This is crazy." Like, dude, you're like so like what the fuck? Which for good reason. I've accepted I'm not normal, and it's so fucking liberating. That's another tweet. But so during this time, outside of school and in the creator economy, I started doing a podcast. And I call the podcast, what did I call it? Modern Mentorship. Based on the idea that like we could create mentors now through the internet. You didn't actually have to know somebody firsthand. Like you could talk to somebody on the internet or just listen to all their podcasts and read their books, and they could become your mentor. So the idea was like, I want to go find different types of mentors and talk to them in a podcast. And my initial thinking was like, okay, these Twitter accounts with like 30, 50, 100,000 followers, they're not going to hop on a call with me as like some random 21-year-old college kid. But if I have a podcast and they get to talk about themselves for an hour and I share it with the world and they can repost it to their audience, okay, then they'll probably do it. So I always had an intuitive understanding of game theory and like social psychology and social dynamics of like, how can we make this mutually beneficial? So that's a really key point if you're interested in the creator economy or any type of energy exchange. It's like, how can we make this mutually beneficial? So I start doing this podcast, and mostly I'm talking to like random Twitter dudes. So the first podcast I did, and it was inspired by this awesome dude named Jason Levin from New York. And Jason had dropped out of Rutgers to pursue social media ghostwriting. And he was at like $15,000 a month as a college dropout doing ghostwriting. And he was gracious enough to DM me and like talk with me and do a podcast with me. And he said a few really, really crucial things. So I'm really grateful for this man. He was like, well, one, he's like, bro, you can definitely do it. Because I told him, I'm like, yo, I have 2 years, or like a year and a half, 18 months till I graduate. I want to find a way to make money online before I graduate so I don't have to work a 9-to-5 job. I actually wrote on my whiteboard, 2 years of discipline equals 80 years of freedom. Like to keep myself motivated and going when I didn't want to do the work, because I was like, if I do the work now, I'm going to create a life where I'm free for the rest of my life. And I was like, bro, I have 2 years. Like, do you think I could do it? He's like, you can definitely fucking do it. And just that comment alone, like, was so powerful for me, because that gave me the confidence of like, if I really pursue this, I can make it happen. He also told me a really powerful thing of like, dude, start a podcast. Like, you don't even have to post it anywhere. Like, nobody has to listen. Who cares? He's like, just have it as a networking tool. He's like, it's the way I get in the door with all these venture capitalists and entrepreneurs. It's how I start to write for them sometimes. I ghostwrite or work on their social media. He's like, I get in the door through the third door, the back door, which is doing a podcast with them. Now I have the connection. Now they know my skill set and they reach out to me and we collaborate. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to start a podcast. So I did the first episode with Jason. And then the next like 15 episodes, I did one with my high school football coach, Coach Mertens, who also had a podcast at the time. And I did one with a guy named Chris Bocher, like a fitness guy on Twitter, who I end up ghostwriting for a little bit later. Not to spoil it too much, but I do. And I talked to these two super cool guys around my age named Tim Carden and Fernando Chao Zhang. And now Tim and Fernando now run a very successful ghostwriting agency on LinkedIn and Twitter, maybe Instagram, I don't think so, but it's called Thought Leader. And so they've like created a beautiful life. They travel, they nomad, we have so many mutual friends, and we started off in a game together. And so we did a podcast, me and Tim, episode 12. If you go all the way back in my Spotify, it's all the way down there. And we talk about ghostwriting. And at that point, I'm like, wow, I might pursue ghostwriting as a path because I didn't know what to do. Like, I was writing on Twitter every day. I was posting pictures of me running. I was like kind of this health guy, sort of self-improvement, also talking about psychology and philosophy. I was like, okay, how do I make money? Ghostwriting seems like it might be the vehicle to go make money so that I can then work on my own things on the side, which turned out to be true. But so talking with Tim and Fernando got me starting to think like, okay, I think I want to do ghostwriting. So I remember one day, this was a big moment. One day before one of my psychology classes, I got to the place early and I had 30 minutes and I called Fernando. And Fernando was setting up like a private group chat with a handful of guys on Twitter who were early. And so he was gracious enough to be like, yo, you're cool. Like, we'll invite you into the group. It was like a group chat from high school, but now it's like Twitter bros trying to make money online. And so he invited me into like the Discord, and then it evolved into a Telegram channel. But some of those early names were like Jad, the Eastern Way, super cool guy. We've done a podcast. Noah Zender was in that squad. Matt Michelini, who I'm going to talk about in a little bit here, one of my really great friends. Fernando, Tim, and Tyler, I think, was in there as well. And so we formed this 7-member Telegram group chat called Momentum Club. And Momentum Club was this group chat where it was 7 guys, all ranging from 21 to 24 years old, so fucking focused on like creating a life of freedom for ourselves. We were either in college, we were either in a corporate job, and we all wanted to leave, and we all wanted this life of freedom. So we would push ourselves, and we weren't just talking about Twitter. We would be like, yo, like, here's what I did today. I ran 5 miles, I squatted 300 pounds, I went to class, I wrote a newsletter, I did a podcast, crushed the fucking day, let's go. And we'd all hype each other up, and we had so much collective momentum because we were all pushing each other and we all wanted each other to succeed. That chat kind of ended up evaporating and disbanding. I think it's still probably active, but we haven't talked in so long because this is over 2 years ago. Everybody goes on their own path. Tim and Fernando started ghostwriting agency. Matt becomes like my best friend. We moved to Argentina together, etc. But then he goes and starts a ghostwriting agency and starts working for a guy doing AI stuff. Tyler and I end up collaborating, not collaborating, and now he's doing some sales type of role. And Jad is like a copywriter, writer. And Noah is working at a startup. So like everybody's doing their own things, but we have that initial tribe connection, so I'm always going to be super grateful for that. So in this chat, me and Fernando got pretty close too. I remember opening up to him about some deep stuff. Like, I opened up to him about my sexual anxiety and sexual performance, and this was a random guy from Twitter, and I told a few people about this in my life, my therapist and like maybe 1 or 2 friends, but he got me on a deeper level, and he's like, bro, I see you, like, it's okay, like, it happens, like, it's okay, and it was just really nice to have that connection. And from that connection, we came up with this collaborative plan to go on a Twitter growth push in the month of January. So this was around early December. School was about to end. It was about to be winter break. And we were both wanting to be Twitter ghostwriters. And so we were learning about paid retweets. So paid retweets is basically you write a thread that has viral potential using like psychology and copywriting principles and virality principles, etc. And you pay a bigger account with like hundreds of thousands of followers to retweet your tweet, so then it gets pushed to more people. So at the time, I'd been saving up money throughout that quarter. I was door dashing. I was a DoorDasher. I would drive, so I would do all this stuff in the day. I would like write in the day, I'd do podcasts, I'd network, I'd go to school, I'd work out, I'd be an RA. I was juggling a lot at the time. I've always been juggling quite a lot. And at night, sometimes from like 6 to 8 or 6 to 9 p.m., I'd go DoorDash in my little 2008 Ford Edge, which was my dad's old car. I'd listen to Dan Coe's podcast, the CoeCast, and I'd DoorDash for 3 hours. So I'd make like $50 to $100 while self-educating, which I was like, this is the biggest hack. And I put out a tweet one time. I'm like life hack. Like I'm listening to Dan Coe's podcast while DoorDashing and making money. And I think he retweeted it, which was so cool. But then he unretweeted it. I don't know why, but I just thought that was so fucking cool. So I had saved up a little bit of money, maybe like I'd gotten back to like $6,000 or $7,000 at this point. And so a few things were coming into my awareness. One was Fernando and I's plan to write 30 threads in 30 days. So 30 Twitter threads. So that's like a pretty good amount of writing. And so the plan was use winter break in December to write and store up as many Twitter threads as possible, invest money in paid retweets, put out one thread a day, and grow a ton on Twitter so that we could be more attractive and valuable to signing our own ghostwriting clients. And we created like some competitive deal where we're like, all right, I'm going to beat you to 5,000 followers. And I think I won. I mean, it doesn't fucking matter. I think he has way more followers than me now. We're playing different games now. But we'll get into that in a second. But the other things that were coming into my awareness at the time were, one, I had gotten accepted to an entrepreneurship study abroad program in San Francisco. So I was going to be moving there January 1st to do 3 months of like this startup entrepreneur experience, like while taking classes, but we're also kind of like touring and startups and things in San Francisco. So I was going to be moving to San Francisco. I had 2 new roommates, Dan Hugh, this amazing dude, genius dude, and Kate Lee. Kate is from, where is she from? She might have been from China. I don't know. She's from the East. And I had these 2 new roommates now, one guy and one girl, geniuses, both so smart. And it was really cool to be around them and like have conversations with people that were that bright and brilliant. So I was going to go to San Francisco January 1st. I was going to use winter break to write all of these threads. And I felt like I was stumbling upon the opportunity of a lifetime with Dakota Robertson's cohort. So Dakota Robertson was launching his first cohort called Growth Ghosts. And the offer was, you'll make $10,000 a month in 90 days or you'll get your money back. Now, there was a lot of like hidden terms and stipulations with this. But Tyler and I were both like, let's fucking do it. And then we got Fernando to like take the leap and do it too. And even though the program didn't like get us to 10K a month, it was still the decision to invest a lot of money in our future selves and in our future of freedom that catapulted us all into a life of freedom, even if it didn't manifest how I thought it would. I mean, Fernando got to 10K a month ghostwriting. I didn't, but I didn't want to. I thought I did, but I didn't want to. Again, money, I thought I wanted. I really didn't. I wanted alignment. I wanted love. I wanted spirituality. I didn't know at the time, but I did. So Dakota's cohort is like $6,500, which is crazy now thinking about it. Like, but he had so much momentum, and this was the first thing he was releasing, and he was super famous, and he had like 200,000 followers, and he was messaging me and Tyler on Instagram. He's like, yeah, I'll let you guys in for like $5,300 or something. So we paid him, and I paid him $5,300, and Tyler did too. And we were in, and we were like the first members in. And that did give us this initial boost now, because there was like 50 people in that cohort, and like that created a whole nother network that we gained access to. So like that's a huge benefit of joining cohorts and programs, is like the network you gain access to, and then gaining access to Dakota, which then led to me doing a podcast with Dakota, which led me to his friend Talon, which led to so many things. So of course it all was perfect, but these were the 3 things that were shaking out. It was the cohort, it was moving to San Francisco, and it was writing 30 threads in 30 days. So, January 1st, 2023. So now we're inching up a little bit closer to the present day. January 1st, 2023. I fly to San Francisco by myself to live there for 3 months. So this is going to be the first time I'm living somewhere for an extended period of time other than the backpacking trip I did the previous summer. And I remember that first day, like getting off the plane, getting settled in my new place, finding there's like a Trader Joe's nearby and an LA Fitness with a basketball court, and it's this mall called Stonestown in Sunset Valley, San Francisco, like the west side of the city. And I remember I went on this run and the sun was setting and I felt high on life. I think I was like literally saying out loud, like I was running and like my arms were up. I was like, I love you, life. Thank you, life. I might have even said, thank you, God. I don't know if I would have said that yet. I didn't know yet. I didn't have that awareness yet. But I was like just overwhelmed with bliss and gratitude and ecstasy of like, I'm 21 years old. I'm here in San Francisco for 3 months. It's beautiful weather. It's winter. I've never experienced beautiful weather in winter. Being from Illinois, and like this is just amazing. And so these next 3 months in San Francisco are extremely transformational. And here's where I meet a lot of new, really fucking great friends in this entrepreneurship program. Oh my God, my heart is full of love for these guys. There's this friend group that was created from that entrepreneurship program, and it was myself, it was Vic, who I know is watching this, I love you, bro. It was Rohan, it was Abi, who's also doing Twitter stuff as well, which was cool, and it was Grant. And so this was kind of like our 5-person squad, and it felt like just being with the boys again, like in high school or middle school. It felt like that same thing. It was 5 of us hanging out. We would smoke joints on their rooftop apartment looking out over the city of San Francisco. We would walk around the city. We'd go out to bars. We'd play basketball in while this court overlooking the whole city. That was a really, really special time. Really special time. I do feel a little bit nostalgic for it. It was, and I even knew at the moment, I was like, this is so special. So that was a really great time. So during school, though, things start to shift in terms of like, what do I want to do with my life even more? So I am even more focused now than maybe I was in that monk mode in the fall quarter. So I think I buzzed my head right away. I had a buzz cut. I wore only black tight t-shirts. I ate 1 meal a day. I was super into Andrew Tate during this time. And I remember there was a huge debate in class around Andrew Tate, and my friend Grant, he had the balls to say, I think Andrew Tate is a good guy, and the whole class freaked out. And he had to go up there and debate the whole class about Andrew Tate, and he was so scared, and I went up with him and helped him. It was so fucking interesting. But I was super into Andrew Tate and strong masculinity at the time, and I'm not into Andrew Tate now. I haven't watched him in years, but that focused discipline, sitting like this, right, super focused, stoic, no emotions, 1 meal a day, only eat steaks. That was the mindset I was in for that period. And I was also into Hamza deeply, self-improvement guy. And I was also into a guy named First Man, who's Chris Sterney, super cool guy. I loved him. But I was still so much in this self-improvement, hyper-masculinity era. But I was also open enough to be smoking weed. I was smoking weed a pretty good amount. And I was still reading philosophy. So I was juxtaposing Andrew Tate and self-improvement with Naval Ravikant, and Paul Millard wrote a book called The Pathless Path, which actually inspired this video series in a roundabout way. Derek Sivers, this super open-minded, creative, eccentric, out-of-the-box thinker. And still into Jordan Peterson and guys like that. But I remember this period of my life was like, still wake up at like 6 a.m. I would walk down the street to the coffee shop, which was like Pete's Coffee Shop in the mall. I would write my Twitter threads. I would send them out to the paid retweeters. I would like be checking all day how the threads are doing. And like during this month of January 2023, I went from 1,000 followers to 7,000 followers because I had all these threads go viral because I learned how to play the game to then be free of the game. That's the thing. You got to play the game to be free of the game. And then you can opt out of all games if you want. But yeah, during that month, I grew to like 7,000 followers, and it was going super fast, and I was obsessed. But I was outsourcing all my self-worth and dopamine and motivation to like numbers on a screen, which is always a trap. Now my philosophy is the art of the Tao, which is post and let it go, which means like there's a quote, I think it's passage 26, I don't know. Maybe it's actually passage 2 also. Yeah, I think it's passage 2. It's like the master does her work and lets it go. She doesn't cling to her work. That's why it lasts forever. And so now my philosophy is like, I'm going to record the video right now. I'm going to post it. I'm going to post the tweet, and I'm not going to check. I'm not going to check anything. And if people comment, if they like, cool. I still notice myself wanting to check. Like, it's still there, like the searching for validation. How many views did it get? Did anybody comment? Did anybody like the tweet? It's still there a little bit, but it's not a predominant driver in my life like it was at the time. So during that time, I'm writing a ton of Twitter threads. I'm growing on Twitter. That's my focus. I'm doing podcasts, and I'm doing podcasts with like bigger level guests. So I said Dakota Robertson, episode 17, Dakota Robertson. That was big for me to get that, and it was like I got 500 views, I got all these new subscribers, people were becoming aware of me, etc. And that led to getting on podcasts with some other really big players, which was fun, and it led to making money, which I'll get to in a minute. But during that time, school is starting to become much less important to me. Like, I remember these realizations. I'm like, okay, I'm in an entrepreneurship program in school, but yet they're teaching us how to become an employee. They're teaching us how to become a project manager, product manager, and all these things, and like work at a startup, which is cool, but it wasn't for me. And I was starting to realize that it wasn't for me, and that was completely okay. And it was for everybody around me, which was a really good test of my character and will to stick on my path. Because everybody around me was like, I remember there'd be conversations around like what's your starting salary? Oh, mine's 180K. Oh, I'm getting 220K from Apple plus bonus. And I was like, I'm gonna try to write Twitter threads and be a ghostwriter. And like that was crazy, right? But I had the level of, it could have been a little bit of arrogance, and I think it's my Leo nature to just be like, no, I'm right. You guys are all fucking wrong. So I think there was a rebellious streak in me again that like I loved it. I thrived on being the outcast. I thrived on being a little bit of a daredevil, the rebel, because I never was. And I remember I stopped showing up to class like halfway through the quarter. And my entrepreneurship program director was like pretty offended by this, and rightfully so. I mean, I got selected to this program with like 15 people out of the whole school, and now like I'm just ditching class to go write on Twitter and kind of disregarding the whole thing. And like there's a field trip, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna go. And I was a fucking rebel at that point, which is crazy. Like I'm grateful for it. I'm really grateful that I had that courage to do that. And I remember I had an intentional conversation at the end of that quarter with that program director of like, this is just the life I want to pursue right now. And she understood. Once we had that conversation, she understood, but she was a bit upset, and she did call me out in front of the whole class. And if anybody's listening from that class, you know, in a Zoom, like about dropping out, she's like, is anybody else just going to drop out like Jack? And I was just sitting there like, so funny times. Another thing that gave me the courage to think about dropping out was we went on a class field trip. This was the last one I went to, actually. And we went to this startup with this kid who was 23 years old named Sheridan Claiborne. Super cool dude, super smart guy. And he was a 23-year-old kid from Northwestern running a $100 million startup, but he dropped out of college. He didn't even finish Northwestern. And I think I asked him in front of the whole class, I'm like, do you ever like think you should have graduated? And like, he's talking to all Northwestern students with the program director that took us on the field trip to go meet him. And he's like, no, like, I don't regret it at all. Like, it didn't change anything for me. It didn't affect anything. And so when I heard that, I started smiling, and I'm like, wow. Okay, so the person I actually want to be like in this situation, Sheridan, who's like 23, running a huge company, super successful, has this mansion. We went to a party at his house. It was insane, just like the place he lived at. And I cared about the superficial at the time. But I was like, this dude didn't even finish. Like, maybe I don't have to either. So I start to play with the idea of maybe this isn't for me. And what really enhanced it was finding a true brother that was on the same mission as me and on the same path. And that was Matt Mick. Matt Mick on Twitter. Real name Matt Michelini. I'm just doxing him, but it's okay. So Matt Mick was one of these early guys in that Momentum Club group chat, and it turned out he was from San Francisco. And I remember getting on a call with him for the first time back in December when I was door dashing still at home to make money, and we got on a call while I was door dashing, and like, me and this dude could talk for hours. We could talk for 3 hours, and I had never really experienced that. Just like this level of open-mindedness and curiosity and his ability to ask questions and see the future and want to go create things and create his own life. I had never really experienced a friend like that. And it's a testament to his open-minded nature. And, you know, I mean, I don't want to dox his life too much, but he's super open-minded. He's done a lot of travel. He's done a lot of plant medicines. He's super open, which I really connected with. And so he lived in San Francisco. And when I was out there, we hung out for the first time. And it was so fucking fun. It felt like it was straight out of a movie. We went on this hike. We went on a drive, and then we went on a hike. And I remember we're driving through the mountains of, I can't remember, somewhere in San Francisco. It starts with an M. Don't know. Doesn't matter. But he said, like, dude, Alan Watts used to live in these mountains and write philosophy books. And I was like, whoa, Alan Watts? Like, I've heard this guy's name, but who is this guy? And I ended up going into this beautiful bookstore in San Francisco maybe a month later, and I bought my first spirituality book, maybe, by Alan Watts called The Wisdom of Insecurity, this blue cover. And it was kind of preceded by that day with Matt, him pointing out Alan Watts used to live in these mountains. And Dan Coe would talk about him too. So we went on that drive, and we went on a hike, and we were smoking a joint, and we got all the way to the ocean, and it was so fucking intense, and it was massive. And the whole hike, we're talking about, like, the creator economy, and, like, we're going to be the next Dan Coes, and, like, we're going to go on this fucking journey. And we get there, and it's like, this feels like it's so surreal. It's, like, more real than real. It's, like, out of a movie. It was so intense. And we ended up hanging out a ton more times after that. He would come drive from his parents' place because he was in a little break from college, and we'd hang out, we'd go on hikes, we'd smoke joints, we'd get on the phone. And I remember the last time we were hanging out, probably early March 2023, he was leaving to go to Argentina. He was leaving to go to Argentina to do a study abroad program, but his secret plan was, he's like, I think I'm going to drop out, like, right when I get there. I just don't want to drop out before so that my parents won't know. So his plan was, like, get there, do the study abroad program, and then drop out right away. And somehow the idea came up of, like, maybe he said it, maybe I said it, I don't remember, but I remember exactly where we were, walking on the sidewalk right in front of my house. And the conversation was something along the lines of, like, maybe I'll go with you. It was maybe just that simple of a statement. And that statement set me pondering it, actually, of, like, whoa, what if I actually did go to Argentina with him? It's super cheap, right? I can live for super cheap. Steaks are endless there for, like, $3, and I was only eating steaks 1 meal a day still at the time. And I started to think about it. I was like, bro, I'm going to actually meditate on this. I'm going to actually think about this. So I start to meditate on it. I think I sat with myself for the first time for 60 minutes, which now I love doing 60-minute meditation. And we're going to be doing these in the upcoming Transcendence cohort. Be on the lookout. But I sat with myself for 60 minutes where I stared at a wall for 60 minutes and I was like, I think I'm going to fucking do this. Like, I got beyond this or that thinking. Previously, I was like, I'm either going to stay in college or I'm going to drop out. But then I got to the place of like, wait, I could just take a break. And then from that place, I was like, I could take spring quarter off through June. Then I could take summer off, no classes in summer. And then by September, 6 months from now, I can reevaluate where I'm at and then make a decision. Do I want to keep doing this or do I want to go back and finish school? So I was able to frame it to my parents that way and myself to make it more reasonable. And so at the time, I'm trying to justify my decision. I'm reading like all the authors who would justify my decision. I'm reading like Paul Millard, Pathless Path. I'm watching his podcast with Derek Sivers, which was really powerful for me going on this journey. James Smith, this other guy, had a book called Not a Life Coach, which really opened my mind. And then I was looking up, like, what does Naval Ravikant think about this? And he had a little video on YouTube, which I used to justify the decision. And he's like, it's actually more impressive to get accepted to Stanford and then drop out. Because it shows you were capable of getting in and smart enough, but you also had the self-direction and courage to go your own way. The courage to go your own way, that's the tagline of Trust Yourself. But he said that, and then Jordan Peterson, another intellectual guy I looked up to, said something along the lines of like, college is a great idea to buy yourself a temporary identity if you don't know who you are and you don't know what you want to do. But at this point, I was already getting in the mindset of like, I'm supposed to go change the world. Like, I'm supposed to be a self-improvement guy who's going to go like influence so many people. So I was like, I think I know who I am and what I'm supposed to do. And two phone calls were really important too. At the time, there's another part to the story I didn't mention. So what made this all possible was signing my first 2 full-time ghostwriting clients. So I had grown to 7,000 followers, and then throughout the month of February, I started to do outreach for the first time, like reaching out to fitness and health dudes to say I want to ghostwrite. So I reached out to one of these early podcast guest connections, Chris Bocher. And at the time, at the beginning, he had like 30K followers. When I reached out to him in February 2023, he had like 60K. And him and his brother were looking to focus more on the operations of their fitness coaching business and like getting people results and outsource the writing. So I messaged him and I'm like, yo, like I'm looking to get into ghostwriting for fitness guys. Like, would you be interested? And he was interested. He's like, yo, let's get this thing to 100K. So I wrote him a few free threads. He tried them out. They did well. And we got on the phone and we made the deal. And I made $2,000 from that contract. And I was going to be working with his brother too, Brett, later. So I was at 2K a month now, and 4K a month was on the way. And then I did a podcast with Taylon Simmons, who was friends with Dakota Robertson, who now has become a really great friend, and I've gone into an ayahuasca in the jungle with him a few times. But at the time, we just did a podcast, and we were becoming friends, and he was in Dakota's community. And I don't know if I told him I was looking for fitness ghostwriting clients or what happened, but he had an agency with like 20 clients. And so there was a 21st guy who wanted ghostwriting from him. And his name was Sam Johnston. And Sam was looking for a ghostwriter. But Taylon didn't have capacity. So he sent him and referred him to me. So I get on the call with Sam and we end up agreeing to collaborate. Now Sam comes back in the picture when I move to Austin, Texas and move across the street from him coincidentally. And I'm still connected with him and his wife, Claire. Really great friends. But it started off as I'm just his ghostwriter. So now I have 4K a month with Sam, with Chris, and I'm almost at 7K a month from Brett. So now I'm like 3 full-time clients. I'm making $84K a year if you extrapolate it out. And I'm moving to Argentina where that's like $1 million a year. And so I get on the phone with Taylon and Dakota when I'm like contemplating this decision, and they're together and they're just like, they're fucking around. They're just like really cool dudes. And I looked up to them so much at the time. I looked up to their opinion because they were like, Dakota was making like $200K off a cohort launch. And Taylor was running this like $50K a month agency. And so I got on the phone with them and I'm like, do you guys think I should drop out of college? Or like, do you think do you think I need a college degree? And they're like, nah, bro, you're so fucking good. You don't need a degree. Like, we don't need our degrees. Like, you can go do this. Like, you can make money. It's cool. And so right after that call, basically them saying that and giving me the encouragement to go do it, I called my parents. So this was a really big call. So I called my parents, and this is the moment I felt I actually shifted from boyhood to manhood. There's been many moments that have felt like that, but this felt like it especially. And I basically told my parents, listen, I'm going to move down to Argentina for the next 3 months with Matt, my new best friend. I'm making $4K, going to be making $7K a month online. And here's the key, and this was the key point. I said to them, I said, this is going to sound bad or this is going to sound rude, but I'm not asking. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the next 3 months. I'm going to actually take the next 6 months, see how this goes, and reevaluate in the fall whether or not I want to continue with school. But right now, this is what I want to go do. And because I framed it that way, and because I framed it as like, 1, this is an experiment, I'm going to see how it goes, and 2, I'm not asking, this is what my heart desires, this is what I want to do, they were on board, and they've always been on board, and they've always been supportive when I do speak my truth and speak from my heart. So after that, booked the flight, booked the Airbnb, and I think it was March 23rd. I go back home. Actually, this was a little bit of a tricky point. I wanted to go straight to Argentina, but my parents and my dad especially really wanted me to come home. But I didn't want to go home at all. I wanted to go straight there. But I ended up coming to my senses and going home for 3 days and then going to Argentina on March 23rd, 2023. 23 is such a significant number for me in my life right now. I'm 23 now. I see it everywhere. And it's interesting, I went down there March 23rd, 2023. And so I booked that one-way flight to Argentina with $200 in my bank account. And that's where this episode ends. So I hope you enjoyed this. This was my intro to the creator economy. It was the origin of me becoming a nomad. It was the origin of me going my own path and trusting myself deeply. It's a really transformational 6 months, coming back from that European backpacking trip, being an RA, starting to write online, door dashing, writing Twitter threads, becoming a ghostwriter, running 2 half marathons, which I haven't even mentioned really that much, but I ran one in San Francisco too, and finding these amazing new groups of friends, both my RA friends in college and then the friends in San Francisco. Some other notable names I want to just mention are like Kate and Dan, good roommates, and Lauren and Shreya, amazing people that I loved hanging out with in San Francisco. So that's how I ended up going to Argentina for the first time, $200 in my bank account, and just saying, fuck it, let's see what happens. And from there, everything really starts to change. I'll leave that for the next episode. If you made it to the end, again, thanks for watching. If you're watching all of these, it's so fucking cool. I have so much gratitude. I love that you're invested in this. Like some texts I've been receiving have been so cool. So thank you so much. I'm sending you so much love. And until the next episode, which is going to be tomorrow. We'll talk soon. It'll be all about digital nomading. Talk soon. Peace.